Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Reverend Dr. Lillian Lammers, and I am an associate pastor at First Congregational Church of Memphis. I'm joined today by other pastors from across the state, calling on local school boards to make the right choice and create and enforce temporary mask mandates in their school districts while the Delta variant is rapidly spreading through our communities. We ask them to make this choice even though it contradicts the executive order issued by Governor Bill Lee earlier this week. Tennessee is in the middle of a dangerous spike in COVID-19 cases, and every person, vaccinated or unvaccinated, in our communities is vulnerable to catching and spreading COVID-19. Because vaccines are only available for children 12 and older, our younger children are a particularly vulnerable population, and they are all returning to in-person school in the next couple of weeks. No matter where they live, what pre-existing conditions they may have, or the politics of their parents, all children deserve to be safe in school. For a year and a half, pastors like myself across the state have called on Governor Lee and our state leaders to take responsibility for managing this crisis, stop ignoring health experts, and require the interventions health experts have said we've needed for months to get this pandemic under control. However, he has completely abdicated his responsibility, and now he is even stripping the authority of school districts to respond to the case numbers in their own schools. It's ironic that he has said he believes in local authority, and when local authorities have made decisions in the best interest of their own communities, he removes that authority when he or his base disagrees. It's no secret that our state is a current COVID hotspot in the surge of the Delta variant, and that we are putting teachers and students in a dangerous situation when they return to school without a universal mask mandate in place. When Hancock County started 2 weeks ago, they opened with optional masks, but within the first day of school, they were forced to implement a mask mandate because multiple students had already tested positive for COVID and quarantines were already happening. This week, Collierville schools here in Shelby County, where I live, had more than 70 students test positive within the first week of school, and over 240 were placed in quarantine. We see this trend happening all over the state, and yesterday here in Memphis, it was reported that a second grade teacher from Cordova died from complications of COVID-19. With schools back in session, the number of 5 to 18-year-old children testing positive over the last 14 days has increased by 950% compared to just 1 month ago. There are over 60 children hospitalized with COVID in our state today, 16 of those in intensive care units. If districts had been empowered to listen to medical professionals at the start of this school year, instead of getting pressure from leaders like Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson, Speaker Cameron Sexton, and Governor Lee, that their funding would be taken, thousands of children across the state would not be sick. We simply wouldn't be in our current situation. And that is a moral failure of leadership. Governor Lee, Jack Johnson, and Speaker Cameron Sexton have not only shown a dereliction of duty to protect their constituents, they have also neglected the call of Jesus in the Christian faith that they claim to profess. Jesus calls us to take up our cross and sacrifice for the vulnerable in our community and to take care of his sheep. Their rhetoric, threats to school boards, and rampant spread of misinformation puts all of our safety and health at risk. And this latest executive order is just the latest refusal to show responsible leadership during a crisis. As a pastor and a mother of 3 children too young to be vaccinated, I stand against the dangerous misinformation and foolish guidance offered by the governor and many leaders of our state. Governor Lee, as a parent, I should have the authority to make decisions for my child about some things. I decide whether she can have dessert before she has finished all the vegetables on her plate, or whether she wears a helmet when she practices riding her bike. It is not my decision to ignore the guidance of health professionals and allow my child to endanger other children in the middle of a pandemic in a school building where children are required to be. In our Bible, the letter to the Ephesians tells Christians that we are called to grow into a mature faith, rejecting cunning and deceitful scheming. Mature faith includes taking seriously the God-given wisdom of doctors, scientists, and public health professionals, not following our own personal whims. Christians look out for one another, and particularly the most vulnerable in our community, including children and the medically fragile. A moral Christian response to this pandemic includes sharing correct information and following medically informed public safety guidelines as part of a commitment to the safety of our neighbors. Governor Lee, do better, or get out of the way of the local school districts that will. Your leadership in this crisis is not biblical. It is immoral. It is not leadership at all. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Reverend Eugene Se Bree in Nashville, for his remarks.
Thank you. I am Eugene Se Bree, and I serve as Associate Pastor at Jefferson Street Baptist Church under Senior Pastor Aaron X. Marble. And I have had the privilege of working in metro schools and charter schools in Nashville, Tennessee, since I graduated grad school in 2012. I'm happy that now the district is making a priority to have a mask mandate, which seeks to protect students and staff from our governor's dangerous executive order. We call on school districts to follow the examples of MMPS, Shelby County, who have stood up to the governor. In districts where masks are not required, not only are students and faculty getting sick, they're also having to close the schools. Yet our governor and our state legislature has made it illegal to have virtual learning days when schools have to close due to quarantine. That means simply that when enough teachers are sick or quarantined, the entire district will shut down and use one of the 10 allotted inclement weather days. Nearly half of the 7th graders at Westview Middle School in Morristown, just north of Knoxville, are currently in quarantine. They have had to move to virtual classrooms, but because Governor Lee made the virtual option illegal, we don't know how this will pan out for the county, the students and their families. They'll likely have to opt out and get further behind in their classes. If our governor actually cared about the learning loss of students, he would be ensuring that schools can stay open and kids stay healthy. Right now, the trajectory for almost every district across the state is that there will be many students sick and in quarantine, that the schools will have to close. And now without a virtual option, thanks to Governor Lee, this fend for yourself and everyone for themselves method the governor has taken for the past year and a half isn't keeping our kids or our families safe, and isn't helping our schools stay open. And like it's been said before, it prioritizes individual freedom to hurt others over embodying the Christian ethic of loving your neighbor as yourself. Yes, people are entitled to their freedom and liberty, but when the actions of one endangers the well-being of so many others, it is our job to protect those who can't always protect themselves. In this crisis, the health of one child affects the health of many other children and their families. The political attacks on public health threatening the life and liberty of children in our schools is simply not acceptable. Philippians 2:4 commands us as Christians to put the needs of others above ourselves. And this includes those among us who are vulnerable, like myself, immunocompromised or unvaccinated, and that includes our children. Like many others, I've dealt with the loss of family members and friends due to COVID over the last year. There are now empty seats at tables around this state and around this country, as well as globally. There are family members who can no longer get hugs, who can no longer hear the voices of others that they loved and cherished so much. We have a chance in Tennessee to protect our children, protect their families, protect our teachers, our staffs within these school systems. Recently, I made the hard decision to resign from my position with MNPS. And that was before the district voted to reinstitute the mask mandate. It was simply due to the fact that I refused to put myself and my family at risk, because we have a governor that cares more about pandering to his base than he does about the health of Tennesseans. Like myself, many others have had to make those hard decisions, to walk away from careers that they love, to walk away from serving their community, their children that they love like their own. We're calling on Governor Lee. We're calling on our state legislature. If you truly embody the Christian ethic that you profess, love your neighbor more than you love yourself. Love your neighbor more than you love your party politics. Stop this foolishness. This time I'm going to pass over to Reverend Brandon Berg. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Se Bree. It's been disappointing, to say the least, to watch so many elected leaders who claim the Christian faith act so contrary to the call of Christ of taking care of our communities and of the vulnerable among us. Jesus himself said that the second most important commandment, through which all other laws and decisions should be weighed, is to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. So surely that includes taking simple and sensible precautions to protect one another's physical health. Now, we as parents will continue to do our part, just like we did through the last difficult and frankly harrowing school year. We will continue asking ourselves every single day, is my child, are my 3 children healthy enough to go to school today? Knowing that the health of our child depends on the health of the child next to them and the child next to that child. If people call themselves Christians, they should be the first to opt into wearing a mask and the last to opt out. And Christians certainly can't claim a religious exemption to choose not to mask. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's our responsibility and our call as Christians to mask for the sake of others and to put their needs above our own. As Christians, it's our duty to opt in for each other. In the Christian tradition, we speak of our relationship to one another and to the community as a body. Every part is different, but essential, and all are interrelated. If any member suffers, we all suffer. We belong to one another. Moral leadership requires making decisions for the good of the whole body. Our personal decisions don't just affect us, they affect every person who lives in our communities. That's why it's so important that we act communally and do the right thing together. In the 25th chapter of Matthew, Jesus tells us to serve the vulnerable among us. Just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. And just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. Both getting the vaccine and wearing a mask is the best way we can care for vulnerable people right now. So, as both a pastor and a father, I'm calling on our leaders to lead with courage. And for everyone who hears me to also demonstrate care for the vulnerable in getting the vaccine and wearing a mask. I don't want to call on just our families, though, or our leaders. I want to invite us into creative resistance, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. modeled, and like Jesus does throughout the Sermon on the Mount. Texas faces similar obstructionist policies from Governor Abbott to those we face from Governor Lee. And the Paris Independent School District in Texas has instituted a new rule requiring masks as part of its dress code. I want to encourage local school boards, administrations, and even teachers to find creative ways to keep our children safe. Because in this moment of crisis, it might just be that what we need is a little creativity. And friends, this is a moment of crisis. Just before we gathered this morning, I received a text from my son at school who said that the nurse is today suddenly overwhelmed by potential COVID cases at his high school, at Tennessee High School here in Bristol. That's terrifying. The cycle that we saw last year is about to repeat itself. But it's not just putting our adult population in danger. It's putting in danger our children, who are much more susceptible to the Delta variant of COVID-19. Friends, do your part. School boards, administrations, resist. And Governor Lee and our leaders, do your part. I want to invite the Reverend Aaron Marble to share with us this morning.
Thank you, Reverend Berg, and certainly to my other colleagues. I thank you for your courage and for your words and for the sacrifice of your time today to share this message. I saw the theme of creativity from Reverend Berg's comments, and also the theme of courage. I believe that centered and rooted at the core of the gospel, Governor Lee, is the need and the example of Christ to love courageously and love radically. Jesus loved courageously and radically, even into the point of death, in the face of religious, social, and political opposition. That those things did not deter his mission or his care, primarily for those that were oppressed and against the systems that oppressed them. Your decision to provide an opt-out in your recent executive order does not hearken yourself unto Christ. Your executive order reflects more of what Herod did in Matthew chapter 2, when he issued an executive order that the babes in Bethlehem under the age of 2 be slaughtered. Thankfully, Mary and Joseph displayed courageous and radical love to save the Christ child, even in the midst of political oppression and opposition issued in the executive order by King Herod. My fear, my concern is that your executive order is placing our children in harm's way. It is not true that the Delta variant does not impact children. Science and objective health data shows us differently. In fact, there are a host of objective statistics that show us quite the opposite. According to the Tennessee Department of Health, as of August 11, there were 49 children in hospitals, 14 in the ICU, and 5 on ventilators due to COVID. On Wednesday, the Vanderbilt University Medical Center reported that out of the 169 COVID-19 patients admitted, 12 are children. The Tennessee Department of Education, as of August 11, reported that there are 7,565 cases among school-aged children from 5 to 18 related to COVID. There is an increase occurring across all of our counties. As a father of 2 beautiful, loving, bright, and healthy children, I now stand at a crossroads and having to make a decision about sending my 5-year-old kindergartner to class, to school, because of your executive order. It is scary, it is frightening, it is enraging, and it is almost unbelievable that you have participated in the manner that you have to lessen the protections for our children. Parent autonomy is good. Parent autonomy is appropriate. But when it comes to the health, safety, and welfare of others, it is our responsibility, particularly those of faith and those of the Christian faith, to be responsible in caring for other people. Masks are a simple, unconsequential element of protection, particularly for our children who cannot get vaccinated. The issue of masks is littered by political ideology. It has nothing to do with science, because science tells us masks work. It has nothing to do with faith, because if Jesus carried a cross, certainly his followers can carry their mask. Sir, we are begging you. We are pleading with you. And as citizens in the state in which you govern, we are demanding of you that you reconsider not only this past executive order, but your total stance that stands in the way of common sense approaches to helping to mitigate the spread of this virus. The question remains for us: is health and science is well enough and good enough and appropriate enough to treat patients when they contract the virus, when they need ventilators, when they need medical professionals? If health and science is able to help them then, why are we not listening to health and science before they have to go? Please, sir, reconsider. Please, sir, take a change of course. Please, sir, have a conversation with persons, with people who are on the front line of this disease, not only in the spaces of the hospital, but in the side of the graveyard and the grave site and the sanctuary, where we have seen not only the physical, but the spiritual and emotional trauma that this pandemic has placed on those we love. Governor Lee, it's time to be like Christ and not like Herod. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We are here today speaking out because we believe in the importance of living out the call of Jesus to love our neighbor as ourselves, and call on our state leaders and school boards to follow the science, protect our children, and reverse the executive order from earlier this week, and allow our local school boards to make decisions to protect their communities. At this time, I will ask if there are any questions from those in attendance, and I'm not sure if you have the ability to unmute yourself or if you are to type those in the chat. But if you can unmute yourself, go ahead and ask your questions. Otherwise, go ahead and type those in the chat. Okay, Brett Kelman, I see you have a question.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. So I understand the argument for masks in schools and the scientific evidence for what you're advocating for. You do not need to reiterate that pitch to me. My question is, if in asking school boards to defy the governor and still require masks, you all are comfortable with functionally asking government bodies to ignore what at the moment is an apparently lawful executive order. And if that's the case, do you see what you are asking for as a form of civil disobedience?
I'll allow my other colleagues to weigh in as they wish, but I'm well aware of what we are asking, and that yes, in some cases it may be a form of civil disobedience. The Christian tradition is full of examples of when following the gospel involves that ultimately the call of Christ to us as followers is to care for the well-being of one another at all costs. There were many times in the Bible where Jesus broke the law as a way, in order to feed people or care for people, as a way of teaching others that sometimes the law can get in the way of doing what is right. Any of my other colleagues want to respond to that as well?
I would just add that while it is a difficult position to ask local municipalities and school boards to defy the governor's executive order, and I don't think our advocation of that is light, but we are very aware that there are many things that would still occur in our school system had not courageous people stood up to what was legal. Our school systems would still be segregated. Our school systems would not operate in the way that they are if persons did not stand up against what was legal. Because just because something is legal does not mean it is just, and certainly does not mean that it is morally right.
Not only that, I would like to add that, yes, we're aware of what we're doing, but we should not be put into this situation by the governor or by state legislators. What we are doing is radical resistance. What we are doing is we are radically loving our neighbors to protect our children, our elderly parents, grandparents who are caring for children when they get out of school while the parents are still working. We should not be in this position. The governor and the legislature have put us in a position to where we have no option but for to call for this radical resistance. I think more importantly, the media, the people should be asking the governor and the legislature, why are you anti-science? Why are you anti-protecting our children? Why are you against protecting our communities? What is there to gain? I shared with the panel before we started the number of losses that I've personally witnessed in my extended family due to COVID. I shared that a good friend of mine, who was a young man, 30 years old, in June of last year was the youngest person at the time to pass away due to COVID complications. And everybody, all of the legislators and the mayors and the governors spoke of how heartfelt, how their heart called out for that family and how they were praying for them and their thoughts and prayers were with them. I don't want your thoughts or prayers. If your prayers aren't motivated, if your prayers don't motivate your actions, keep your prayers.
Thank you all for the question.
Are there any other questions from any of our attendees? Okay, well, hearing none, as is our custom, we will close this conference with a brief prayer. Gracious God, merciful God, God of healing and source of wisdom, we ask that you protect our neighbors as we are once again battling a deadly surge of COVID-19. We also ask that you give wisdom to those appointed or elected to positions of authority, wisdom to listen to facts and make accommodations to protect those around us and those under their care, especially the most vulnerable, God, which was your instruction to us. Give us courage to call out false teachings and give us hearts to always seek to do what is best to keep one another safe. Amen. Thank you all for joining us this morning.
Thank you.